section of the agenda for public discussion and comments on agenda items. Please refer to the regulations regarding discussion and comments that is posted next to the sign-in sheet. So we have only one person signed up for this section, and that's Mr. Collada. We want to talk about committee reports.
Thank you. I wish to thank the board for initiating the budget process for next year by first requesting the administration to put forth their priorities for your consideration. Having attended many of these meetings, I can say in all probability priorities will outnumber dollars available. In addition, there are many ongoing programs that will require your consideration for continued funding. In that vein, let me express a view regarding the goal of an educational budget. That being to fund programs and systems that are required to graduate all students with the best possible skill sets. With that in mind, I would like each of you to consider these questions during your deliberations. On accountability, how effective has the spending over the last few years brought about improvement to the district's long-term plans? What does the data show regarding improved proficiency and graduation rates? What parts of the curriculum at each level could benefit from more attention to raise proficiency? What programs are failing to show effectiveness for the time and resources invested to date and should be revised, reduced, or eliminated? What elective programs are using resources inefficiently that should go instead toward raising the proficiency and graduation rates? This district does get a lot of grants, and in that vein, what evidence is there that grant monies are contributing to this district's strategic plans to improve proficiency and graduation rates for all student groups? What has been learned to improve the delivery and outcomes of such programs for the following year? What grant programs have failed to bring about significant measurable gains and require more scrutiny? Given that grants have a limit of time and funding, what needs to be budgeted to fund those that have demonstrated effectiveness toward the district's goals of improved proficiency and graduation? Also in the budget are considerations for administration. And along those lines, how effective have the current computerized record systems been to assist administration to effectively monitor and affect student outcomes, such as attendance, academic progress, and behavior? What needs to be done to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of these systems to bring about improved student outcomes? Along that same line, a recent newspaper article revealed that a program we use, APEX, is coming under scrutiny. A local school district has been charged with grade fixing using such systems. This is not to imply Newburgh is in that same ballpark, but a report by the U.S. Department of Education shows that while nearly 90% of high schools are using this in the United States, many have come under scrutiny for being the center of controversy similar to that found in the local school district, New Rochelle. Such systems can be valuable second chances for students, as was pointed out to this board, to learn the material, but poor oversight could lead to exploitation. How well is our APEX program doing to improve student academic proficiency and graduation rates? And finally, the administration has recommended to the board quite a few personnel appointments to assist classroom teachers. In short, how well is that going? What data shows that the effectiveness of these efforts are paying off? Each year, the board puts together a budget for the purpose and goal of educating all of our scholars toward graduation. How successful has this district been with such budgets in the past? For some perspective, please reflect on this fact. Over the past 4 years, this district has spent over $1 billion. What does the data show regarding how well that billion was spent to raise proficiency and graduation rates for all the student groups? Thank you, and best of luck in your deliberations.
Would anybody else like to address the board on agenda items? If not, we're going to move on. I'm going to turn this over to our superintendent of schools, Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everyone. I have a couple of items under my section, and the first being a recognition. So I'm going to ask that our Colonel Stewart come up to the microphone and just tell us a little bit about what our scholars are doing, the performances they've engaged in, so that way we can recognize their efforts and achievements.
All the cadets that are here tonight are members of our competition drill team. We are a former national champion from 2000, so it's going to take us a while to get back to that level, but we do have a distinguished record. There are 8 different major events and 4 events involving smaller cadets in any drill competition. We don't compete in all of them, but most of them. One of the ones we regularly compete in is the unarmed inspection. Our team has 13 members. We're going to do a mini demonstration with 3 cadets inspected by our group commander, Cadet Colonel Larissa Hansen.
Good evening, ma'am.
Why is the flag at half staff?
Ma'am, the flag's a half step. It was the 41st as you were. Ma'am, the flag's a half step. It was the 41st United States President, George H.W. Bush, has passed away.
For how many days is that half staff?
Ma'am, the flag will remain at a half step, 30 days.
Who is the superintendent of the Newburgh and Large City Schools?
Ma'am, the superintendent for the Newburgh and Large City School District is Dr. Padilla.
Good evening, ma'am.
When was the Air Force established?
Ma'am, the United States Air Force was established on September 14th, as you were. Ma'am, the United States Air Force was established on September 18th of 1947.
Under what act was it established?
Ma'am, the United States, as you were. Ma'am, it was established under the National Security Act, ma'am.
Who is the director of AFJROTC?
Ma'am, the director of AFJROTC is Colonel Paul C. Lips.
What is your highest award of pageant achievement?
Ma'am, this cadet's highest award is, as you were. Ma'am, this cadet's highest award is the Silver Star Community Service Award with Excellence, and we obtained this by completing over 4,800 community service hours.
Good evening, ma'am.
Who is your school principal?
Ma'am, this cadet school principal is Mr. Rodriguez.
How many credits do you need to graduate?
Ma'am, you need 22 credits to graduate high school.
What is the unit community service goal for this year?
Ma'am, the unit community service goal for this year is 5,000 hours.
How far are we to reach that goal?
Ma'am, we are 3,561 hours into that goal.
You're dismissed.
Yes, ma'am. Right. Hey. Forward. Forward.
Cadets participating in this event are judged on their military bearing, their uniform, and their ability to answer questions, and we don't always know what the questions are going to be. So it's very competitive. We also participate in unarmed exhibition. It's normally a team of 9, and actually we were second place in an event last weekend. And we have a team of 2, so this would be called dual exhibition.
Three,
Free Academy, Air Force Junior, ROTC, Screaming Eagles from Newark, New York, is requesting permission to conduct unarmed duel on your drill area. Thank you, ma'am. Newburgh. Newburgh Free Academy, Air Force Junior, ROTC, Screaming Eagles from Newark, New York, has completed unarmed duel and is requesting permission to leave your drill area. Thank you, ma'am.
That was Cadet Tatiana Zapata and Cecilia Vasquez.
Colonel, I know a little something about stepping. Fighting back, an opportunity to join them. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for supporting our scholars, and I continue to say this loud and proud across our country that we have phenomenal talent in our district, and thank you for preparing them. It's kind of a wrap. We should just end the meeting on that. So this past week, we provided the Board of Education attendance data based on a request at our recent policy committee, and that data has been made public. And so I'll just describe what this is. As you can see, there's a lot going on there. So this is a 3-year look back regarding building level attendance for each of our schools. There's an average of the 3 years in the dark, all the way to the left, and then our current school year is in lighter shaded gray, 18-19, as to where we are at this point in the school year. I'll stop there. I don't know if there's any comments or questions, but again, this was what was requested at our most recent policy meeting.
Mr. Levinstein.
I was just wondering, if it's broken down by month, so is there any way to look at it on a yearly basis to see whether there's improvement or not? It doesn't really shift. It's hard to figure it out this way when it's down by month. So by building, but by year instead of individual months.
Mr. Johnston?
Yes, thank you for providing this data. I'd like to point out one reason that the average daily attendance, I don't think is enough for us really as far as attendance data goes. It's an interesting mathematical problem. The new ESSA requirements, they've defined a threshold of 90%. And if you're not meeting that attendance threshold, you're a chronic attendance, you have chronic attendance issues. And that's what's going to be used for ESSA. And when you look at the average daily attendance for a large set of people, like this table shows us, you don't get a grasp of how many students are in that category of not meeting that 90% requirement. And it's the interesting mathematical problem is you can figure out what the range of possible chronic attendance values would be. And it's a pretty large range. It's actually surprisingly large. For example, you might look at an average that says 94%. And one way you could look at that is if every student is achieving that 94%, then you would have zero people with chronic attendance problems. So 0 is the minimum. The maximum is actually rather surprising. I think it's over 35%. So I think we need more data to kind of understand what's happening within the school district. But I appreciate this as a start. Thank you.
I just want to, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Again, I'm just reiterating what the request was, and that's the information that's here. As you know, based on some prior information that we provided the Board of Education, the district has really drilled down on what ESSA is requiring, remembering that this is new to everyone this year. We have attendance teams in place at each school. We have a new attendance framework for the district, and it certainly would be important for us to report back to the board in the spring or later at the end of the school year to highlight, what schools, what their chronic absenteeism rate is and such. So we'll continue to, share this information and answer your questions.
Mr. Stradone, you had a question?
Yes, if you had a student at the middle school or the high school level who missed one class during the day unexcused, would they still be considered 100% attendance for that day?
I don't believe so, but we will confirm that and provide that information at our next policy meeting.
There should be some kind of designation in these numbers whether they include cutting.
That's not what was requested.
Okay, so this is just attendance of a student, they showed up that day. If it's 93% daily attendance, then 93% of the students were at school at some point during the day, during that whole month.
Yeah, again, this is simply the response to what was requested at the policy meeting. So it doesn't reflect cuts, doesn't
reflect cuts at all.
This reflects the attendance by building for each month over the last 3 years. That's what the request is.
So what's the definition of 100% attendance that day? If you missed one class unexcused, is that considered 90%?
Yeah, that's not going to be reflected in here because this is the entire school.
Okay.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, Madam President, to the superintendent. So you stated ESSA numbers. Can you state what the ESSA threshold is and what our number is, and what is the penalties for coming in violation of the ESSA number? Is it a recommended number? Is it a mandatory number?
So I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, ESSA is requiring 90% or better. So anything under 90% would be considered chronic absenteeism. I cannot tell you with great certainty what the penalty is. All I can say is based on what has been communicated, and this is by way of required sessions that district officials had to participate in. So there's something next month based on a requirement, so that's why tonight you see that as a resolution for 3 key individuals in the state have to report to Albany next month. That's a requirement. All we know at this point is that this will be part of school and district accountability. So it will show up as part of one of the indicators, and the criteria being students under 90%. So we are proposing 91% as a district.
So ESSA is in full gear now. ESSA has started.
It has started, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnston.
Yes. I would also appreciate a clarification of what these numbers actually mean. I think for the elementary schools, I think it's clear to me that it would be daily attendance. But for me, there is some ambiguity about the secondary level. And I don't know whether what gets counted is attendance in homeroom or attendance in the first period of the day or a majority of the periods of the day. I think it would be helpful to have that clear. Yeah.
So we'll provide that in January.
Mr. Levinstein.
So getting back to Mr. Johnston's original point of if ESSA requirements is per student being 90% attendance rate, not per building, correct? So this data, like you pointed out, does not really show that. How many students didn't meet that requirement versus the building overall attendance for that day, week, month, year. So that's an additional data if it's possible to weed that out, that data.
It is our understanding at this point that chronic absenteeism by building is embargoed. We have several calls to the state, and we're just waiting to hear back to see if it's been released. To our knowledge, it hasn't. It will be by student and by building. So certainly, well, again, I can't speak to this with great certainty, but I would propose that they're going to take an aggregate of the students in that building and how many of them have above or below 90% to determine if a school met the criteria or not.
Board members, any other questions or comments?
My only last thing is to just bring attention to some of the district branding that's starting to take place and will be revealed next week. So we hope that as you're driving, you'll pay close attention to some new bumper stickers that will be coming out to show off our pride for students who have achieved the status of honor roll. And so this reflects our branding, but also allows parents and families and certainly our scholars to feel proud of the fact that they've accomplished honor roll status for the first quarter. So on that note, Madam President, I conclude my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Badillo. We're going to move on to board committees. We'll start with the Personnel Committee. Ms. Booker.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Howard.
Okay. Yes, Madam President, we discussed several resolutions that are on the agenda for this evening, and we also did the budget priorities for the Personnel Committee, which included recruitment and automation, new teacher orientation, onboarding, leadership development, and full-time health benefits specialist requests.
Thank you. What do you want to do with the buildings and grounds, Ms. Prokop?
I believe there was not a quorum, so it didn't happen.
We did 2 items that are on the agenda in curriculum and instruction, though. So let's move on to exceptional learners. No, policy, Mr. Howard.
Yes, Madam President. We had a spirited discussion around policy number 5411, participation in student extracurricular activities and athletics. And some information was requested by members of the committee, and it is my hope and intention as chairman of that committee that after our next meeting that we will bring it back to the entire board for discussion, because I believe that at this point in time it's time for all members to weigh in on 5411. And we also talked about policy number 5100, comprehensive student attendance.
Thank you. Would you like to continue with exceptional learners, Mr. Howard?
Absolutely. Our Exceptional Learners Committee, we had a very informative meeting. We went over the BES Day data. We talked about ICT data by building. It was explained by our assistant superintendent, the balance throughout the district as far as ICT. We had an incredible presentation, Learning the Brain, neuropsychology of mathematics, which was an incredible presentation. So I think members should get some information on that because it was a very good presentation presented. And we also had a resolution for the superintendent with an agreement with FACES, F-A-C-E-S, for the MLK initiative.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee. The items on the agenda that appear on the agenda were discussed, as well as we got a professional development update. We had the proposals from some elementary extended day programs were discussed, and that's Fostertown, Temple Hill Academy, New Windsor. We also had a little discussion about EPE and the GED programs, which are held off campus, and they're for adults, young adults, okay? And then we started talking a little bit more deeply about the CNI budget priorities, both elementary and secondary, and all of them are tied into either the superintendent's goals or the board's goals. We're going to move on to the Audit and Finance Committee. Mrs. Santiago.
Thank you, Madam President. Most of the items that we discussed are on today's agenda. Just one point that I wanted to share is that some of our committee members, Mr. Levinstein and Ms. Burton, brought up some really great questions on some of the items that we're accepting as donations for the using different grant funds. Asked about what if there's a regulation policy, how the items are inventoried and how they affect their grant, given that I think one of the items was drones for almost $31,000, some of the drones that have been purchased and so forth, just if there's some accountability in the district to protect those items for further use. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction Elementary, Mrs. Felice.
Good evening, Madam President. This evening, elementary would like to submit items 5.1 through 5.3 as part of a consent agenda.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Brokaw?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes our elementary items.
Thank you, Mrs. Felice. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Secondary, Dr. Spindler.
Good evening, Madam President. I would like to present items 6.1 through 6.3 as a consent agenda this evening.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Stridiron.
On item 6.3, which building will this new course be taught in?
We're going to offer, we offer all of our courses for our 3 campuses. It's also based on enrollment. So if we have enough students that would like to enroll in the course, then we could run it. So that's why sometimes the majority of the courses will be held at Maine because the population there is larger.
Do you currently have AP English at North Campus?
We currently do not have the AP at North Campus, but we currently run other college level courses through there and also through our PTEC.
Are there any other questions or comments on these items? Roll call, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Brokaw?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. We're going to move on to the Assistant Superintendent of Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bayer.
Good evening, Madam President. I have two items to present, items 7.1 and 7.2 on the consent agenda.
Would any member like to separate out any of these two items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Prokop? Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago? Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Johnston?
Thank you. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Mr. Kern.
Thank you, Madam President. Finance would like to present tonight items 8.1 through 8.11 for consent agenda.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Prokop?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Madam President, that concludes the items for finance for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kern. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McElmore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 9.1 through 9.8 for your consideration tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes.
9.7, please.
I'd like to entertain a motion on 9.1 through 9.8 minus 9.7. Any questions or discussion on those items? Yes, sir.
The other items, 1 through 9.8,
Minus 9.7.
So just asking for a little general clarification and a request maybe in reference to stipends. It seems that there's two types of stipends. There's one where the district creates a position and they post it and employees apply and someone is selected and then it comes before the board. And then there's also a different stipend where someone is already doing a certain job and we either ask them to do something different or they're doing something beyond their normal job duties. And we create a stipend for that too with a person in mind. So my question is just on those stipends, if that person could also be listed in future stipends, because it's not creating a job and someone's going to apply to it. We're giving it to someone because they deserve it, because they're doing extra work, or we want them to do something different. So I just thought, since that's tied to an existing employee, that should be listed on that particular stipend. I think it used to be at times.
Mr. Short, can you comment on that, please?
I'm not quite sure that I understand the second point that you're making about people who are in positions and they're doing extra work. Is that overtime within their current job title? Are they employees who are subject to the Fair Labor Standards Act? Are they exempt employees?
Well, we have approved stipends for people that have been, last week it was someone who does the internships and now, that was, I'm just saying the name should be listed for people. We're only making that stipend for that person doing that particular duties, whether it goes beyond their normal duties or not, but we're creating that stipend for a particular person, not for anyone else to apply for. I believe, that's as far as I know.
Yeah, I think we're bound to put a posting. So to your point, if we have someone in mind, yes, but there's still, a posting is still required, and it doesn't prevent someone else from applying now that they know there is a posting. I get completely what you're saying, but I think we're sort of bound by making sure there's a posting, even if we may have someone in mind. There needs to be a posting, and people are allowed to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on those items except 9.7? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Prokop?
Yes.
Mr. Stritter?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Benel?
Yes. We're going to move back to 9.7, please. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussions? Mr. Stritter?
This item deals with credit recovery. Could someone please explain how that credit recovery will work, because it's at the middle school level?
Dr. Spindler?
So middle school students don't actually earn credit unless they're in an accelerated 8th grade course program. In some rare instances, a 7th grader taking advanced placement courses. So there really is, we're looking for opportunities for them to be able to close their learning gaps, obviously, and increase their academic achievement so that they can maintain a passing grade, which will, because of our policy, hopefully reduce the amount of retainments in the middle school. Additionally, we would like this program to target them right in the quarter in which they're having, not being successful, rather than waiting to the end of the school year. So that's our policy, that we retain students, but that's, of the board. That's not necessarily something that's driven by the state. So that's why we call it middle school intensive support program, and so that students can recover some of the skills that they're missing, but it's not credit bearing at a middle school level.
Mr. Howard?
Yes,
I'll get back to you.
will this program be mandatory to students who are failing 1 or 2 classes, or will it be a suggestion, a recommendation?
Yep. So the letter that we'll be sending out states that we strongly recommend. We cannot require them to do this. If the students in the end up failing 3 or more in their core, they would be retained according to our policy.
Back to you, Mr. Stritter.
So this is going to be teacher-centered. The teachers that have the students that are failing will be paired with the same students that are failing their own classes, or is it going to be almost like a rotating group? How's that going to work?
Thank you for that question. So there's a posting, and then individuals for each of the core will be selected by the school principal in an interview process, and that content area specific teacher will teach those courses. So teachers will be asked what skills and what assignments can the child make up, as well as that teacher providing skills and building workshops within that program after school.
Mr. Howard?
Yes. So with this letter that goes home to the parents, we know that's about the age when kids get a little creative and they can get to the mail a little quicker than the parents can. If we don't get responses from the parents, do we have a follow-up procedure where we will follow up with the parents and let them know about this program?
Yeah. So we did consider that middle school age student in that. So we were going to have a hand delivery of a letter, obviously at home in their book bags, as well as a mailing home. And we intend on doing a verbal call to say that this is something that is provided. There's also an administrator that is going to be able to be appointed to this program, and that would be part of their administrative duties as well, to be able to be following up with the students and the parents.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Stritter, back to you.
I just want to clarify that this is going to be teacher-centered, not a computer program.
So a computer resource, such as an instructional arm for iReady, might be another resource that the teachers can use, but we're hoping for it to be driven by instruction. But you have to remember there's going to be a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade student in that class, so there might be some differentiation happening with some online support. But currently, so you're asking about a specific, similar to the Apex, that's not currently in the model that we're going to be moving forward, but we offer our teachers to use a plethora of online resources.
So if the student does eventually fail that class, what's the option to recover that credit after they've gone through this program?
So we intend to offer this program each quarter for the recovery. In the event that they fail, that they would be given an opportunity to attend summer school. In the event that they fail in summer school, then they would be retained.
And just for clarity, this is not credit. Dr. Spindler mentioned that. And the key point here is not waiting till the end of the year, but quarter by quarter, providing opportunities for students to close that learning gap along the way. And that's probably one of the pillars of what we're trying to do with this program.
Are there any other questions on this item or comments? Yes, Ms. Burton?
So a couple of questions. This is after school?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just curious in terms of, has there been discussion with these schools and administrators in terms of how this will be integrated in the after-school programs that are operating? So that's one question. The second question is, are these, the teachers and all of the staffing, is that based on students that you already know need this service? Or is this projected, or how did you come up with this level of staffing?
So we wanted to make sure that we were offering it at all 4 schools that have grades 6 through 8, and we wanted to make sure that we had a content-specific certified teacher in each of the core areas, which is math, science, social studies, and ELA. We did not have a predetermined number beforehand, so we just offered all of the same staffing to each of the buildings, but we have run a report for each building and each grade level and each core for the amount of failures.
So I'd like to know more about what the plan is for the administrators monitoring this program, because I'm really curious to know how this is going to be integrated after school, because we already have at these schools a lot of other stuff going on. So how are these kids going to be clearly identified and designated to go to an academic program like this when there are other fun stuff going on as well?
Yes, we did discuss that, and based on the title funding that we have, it will, and the grant funding, they will be happening in tandem, but it wouldn't be, this is for 4-week recovery, so it's not the entire time, and other after-school programs extend throughout the entire school year. Also built within this credit recovery program is that if the student is to maintain good standing in the program and then also not have to retake a course the next quarter, we are going to offer an incentive to those students that are succeeding. So in your question about monitoring, there is an administrator that will be monitoring the after-school program as well as the credit recovery program, and and having those conversations with parents about the academics being important.
Are there any other, yes, Mr. Stern?
Similar to the APEX program in the high school, is there an minimum attendance requirement to qualify for this program?
Yes, we do have a minimum, we will have a minimum attendance requirement to keep it consistent. Additionally, students need to attend 10 out of the 12 days to be eligible to restore their grade.
Something before the program starts. If a student doesn't come to school and they're failing the class, are they going to take precedence over the students that are failing that have been to the class all the time?
No, they would have to meet the attendance requirement for this program as well. So if they're not attending the school during the day, they wouldn't be offered the opportunity to recover it in the after-school program.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Ms. Burton?
So I'd like to see some benchmarks for this program. I'd like to see who would be eligible, and at some point in time, you said it's a short-term program, so because it's that intensive, I think it needs to be that intensively monitored as well. So I'd like to see some benchmarks put in there so that we can really monitor this.
If I can have some clarity on the benchmarks, what are you exactly looking for? So you're looking at to see that the reduction, I'm just going to assume that the reduction in the amount of students who are failing or progressing. I just need some clarity on benchmarks.
I think benchmarks are their job. I think what we need is, we need to see whether it affects our goals, whether it improves the graduation rate or not. So, okay, so Dr. Padilla will help us with that. Mr. Howard.
Yes, Madam President. So also at the committee level, we had a conversation around the enrichment programs and the academic catch-up. And the conversation was about trying to emphasize the importance of the two being inclusive of each other and not exclusive of each other. So there was a great conversation, and when we left there, there was going to be a conversation had between central administration about how to maybe enforce that, not enforce, that's a strong word, but to encourage that students who are failing do not neglect to take this course, but want to take the enrichment courses. We were going to have that conversation. Did anything come out of that conversation?
So right now, we're at the stages of identifying the students and seeing who will attend, and then we're going to work through that. This is a new program that we're embarking on that we're really excited about, and so as that unfolds, we're hoping to maybe adjust our flex schedules so that students can benefit from both. As we proceed with that, I'll keep the board abreast of it.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Johnson?
I'd like a little more information about the relationship between this program and student grades. By taking this program, can students change a failed grade from, that has already occurred, or is there any, what's the effect of this program upon the grades that students have in their record?
So we would anticipate that the teacher is going to collaborate with us and let us know the skills that were deficient in the student's progress for that quarter. And if there is an opportunity allowed by the teacher to make up that grade for that quarter. It's a little, the regulations are not as stringent as a high school credit recovery program because it really isn't credit bearing. It's like I said before, it's a board policy whether we decide to socially promote or retain. It's not driven by New York State. So we anticipate that we're hoping that the work that the student makes up is accepted by the teacher and allowed to have a passing grade of up to a 65. But we can't force the teacher to change her grade, if that's your question.
Yeah, that almost answers my question. And I very much appreciate the focus on skills and identifying the skills that the students are lacking and finding a way to dedicate more time and more instruction to get the skills where they need to be. I think that's great. I'd just like to be clear about whether after a quarter grade has been recorded, will this program allow for that grade to get changed, or do you anticipate kind of making up work in kind of the current quarter before that quarterly grade has been assigned?
So whenever a grade is changed, it has to follow procedures with the principal before a grade can be changed in our student management system. So that was there will be a protocol in place for that. But again, like you said, the goal of the middle school program is really to build those skills and less about the grade and more about the skill development and also the ability to be able to be promoted to the next grade. And there's a lot of research that shows that students who in the middle school years are able to less retainment increases their ability for graduation rate. So we're taking that research into consideration with this initiative.
Mr. Stradine.
There was a presentation at the curriculum committee about 2 years ago, I believe it was from GAMS, regarding the fifth graders, that they need a program similar to this. Is that something that could be put into the works as far as finding out how much it would cost, whether grant, title money could be?
Could you do me a favor? Email me as the chairperson of curriculum, and we'll put that on as a discussion question, because I think that's a really good discussion question. And that might even go into budget discussions for next year. Thank you, Mr. Stern. Does anybody else have any more questions or comments on 9.7? Yes.
Just which subjects are going to be taught? Are there specific subjects that will be covered by the program?
Yeah. So the 4 core, which is math, science, social studies, and ELA. However, in reviewing the data, we